but you never steer me wrong. So lead on, good shepherd, lead on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the For His Namesake podcast, where we talk about leadership skills for this generation that they can use not only in their church, school, and community, but most importantly, their entire Christian walk. And so today with us, we have Pastor Christian Powell, pastor at Faith Free Will Baptist Church in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Just want to thank you for coming on today. And just so everybody can learn a little bit about you, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for letting me be on the podcast. And I look forward to dialoguing, engaging, and I hope I can say something that would just be an encouragement to some people. But I'm 54 years old. I feel like I'm a geezer sometimes. But I'm the pastor here at Faith. I've been at Faith as the senior pastor for 11 and a half years almost. But for 21 years before that, I was privileged to be the associate pastor. Started out as youth pastor and was youth pastor for 21 years. And so really this has been our home for over 32 years. And I have two sons. One, his name's Andrew. He's 23 and he's a sheriff's deputy here in our town or in our county. And he and his wife, Allison, they just had a little baby 2 months ago. And so I'm a papaw. And my little grandbaby, Micah, he has me wrapped around his little pinky. And then we have my wife, Erin, and we have a 17-year-old son named Elisha. And he's a senior here in our school and in our church, obviously. And I love people. I really do genuinely love serving Jesus. And I'm privileged and blessed and highly favored. And I'm very thankful for the people God has placed in my life and the opportunities the Lord has given me just to know people and just to have them impact me in a special way, and bear a positive leadership influence in my life. And I'm a Tar Heel fan. So I had to
We could tell by
throw
your
that in
office. We definitely could tell by your office. And so that's awesome. And it's awesome with the longevity being at Faith that long. And, over the years, what are some leadership opportunities that you've got?
Well, I think there's positional leadership, right? Which is because God has opened the door for you to have a certain position. That position brings with it a certain level of influence. I do think that the more influential leader not only has positional leadership, but what I call personal leadership. And that by their very life, their very integrity, even sometimes their own natural charisma and their ability to connect with people, that God gives them a leadership platform that transcends any position or any title. But God has allowed me to be in ministry here at the same church among the same people for so long, 32 and a half years, almost 33 years now. I think that brings with it a certain leadership platform, if I could say it that way. I also have served at times in various capacities in denominational leadership here in the state of North Carolina. I've been on the executive committee for a while, having served 2 different stints on the executive committee. I'm also privileged to be on the board of directors at Southeastern College. And I certainly love that opportunity to try to bear an influence there among the college students. I love being able to teach as an adjunct professor the young men at Southeastern. That's just one of the joys of my life that I get to do, that I love pouring in to the preachers, to the young preachers especially. Not that I have a wealth of knowledge. I don't, but I have a little dab of experience that I hope that maybe through some of my mistakes and lessons that I've learned the hard way, I could help encourage you and other young men who are coming along beside me and coming behind me even. And then I love being able to shepherd our own local church and the men and women that the Lord has surrounded me with and put me in charge of shepherding. I realize I'm not the chief shepherd. I'm the under shepherd. Christ is the chief shepherd, and he has charged me with the responsibility to lead these people, to try to pour Christ into them, to influence them, for them to chase the Lord and chase after Jesus, and for them to grow as a disciple and a disciple maker. We say around here, and I hope it's becoming more true, that our purpose is to make disciples who make disciples, who make disciples, who then make disciples. And we want to see that come to a reality in every life that we're able to touch.
Awesome.
I don't know if that answers your question or
Yeah,
not.
it did. And through the years of you being at Faith and helping out at Southeastern in the state, who are some people in leadership that you observed and that who you look up to?
There are several who have directly impacted my life. Now, some in that group, well, I want to be careful how I say this. Just because of life and seasons of life and age and aging, I'm going to mention some names that a current generation may not be as familiar with. But I can tell you personally in my own life, the three men who influenced me more heavily than any other. First of all, my home church pastor, Dr. Randy Cox, who pastored what used to be First Free Will Baptist Church in Raleigh. He was what I like to call my first pastor, and the man who was preaching the night I got saved. He was and is still, he's still alive, I believe 94, and still preaches. But just a godly man of integrity, a sound preacher of the word, a man who loved souls, and a man who was consistent, a man who loved people and genuinely loved me and invested in me. I would say that next on that list, and maybe it's not in necessarily any order, but Pastor Tim Rabin, who was my youth pastor. He actually led me to the Lord. He was the man who walked me down the Romans road, as I like to say, and who prayed with me and led me to Christ, and really was my hero. And more than hero, he was like my spiritual father in the Lord and in the ministry. He was my Paul. And I'm not equating myself to Timothy. I'm just saying that Tim Rabin, God used him as a leader in my life. I was able to be in his home many times. And I came from a dysfunctional home situation where in my home, when I was growing up, I didn't have a godly dad or a godly man present in my home. Tim Rabin showed me what a genuinely godly husband and father looks like. And he role modeled that for me. And I learned from him that spiritual leadership, if it's not real at home, it's not real anywhere. And that really had and continues to have a profound effect and impact on my life. So I would say Dr. Cox, Brother Rabin, and then I would say most definitely the man I had the privilege to serve with for 21 years here at Faith, Pastor Dan Patrick, who genuinely is as godly a man as I think I've ever known. A very principled man, just so many superlatives that I would say at one time in our movement, he was the prince of preachers, and just a wonderful, wonderful pastor. I learned from him the importance of people and being intentional with people and ministering to people. And these men, and man, I could talk about college professors. I could talk about Dr. Danny Dwyer. I could talk about Dr. Randy Sawyer. These men at college, Brother A.B. Brown, who had a profound impact on my life. And still to this day, those three men I'm in contact with, my former professors, who tell me routinely that every day of their life they pray for me and my wife. And Casey, I can't overemphasize how important that is, that these men who are now in their 70s, these men who are in their late 60s, 70s, and some bumping 80, that they still call Christian Powell's name out to the Lord. And they're still, through their godliness and their character, their consistency, their longevity, they're still impacting my life. Their leadership is still bearing fruit continually in the lives of those around them.
That's awesome. And seeing and observing those people and the people that have mentored you and the people you observed and through your own personal experience, if you could define leadership in one word, what would it be?
I don't know if I could keep it to one word, but I'll try. And I'm going to borrow what John Maxwell coined years and years ago. And you've probably heard this 1,000 times before. Leadership is influence. What kind of influence, what kind of impact are you making on somebody? That's leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership is not pontificating. It's not demanding something. It's not this authoritarian spirit. Leadership at the very core is a person's ability to bear an influence on somebody else. And you see that in the life of Jesus, who I think all of us would agree was the greatest leader, is the greatest leader mankind has ever known. And watch how Jesus led. Watch how Jesus impacted. It was through his influence. Yes, through his words, obviously, his sermons, his lessons, his object lessons, right? But even more than that, he had a way to connect with people. And his connection opened the door for him to be able to influence them and impact them.
And, through that, and we've talked about, that's even quoted in Josh Barrett's chapter. That was a thing that he talked about a lot. And with influence and your chapter, kind of segueing into your chapter about being a servant, you, at the beginning of your chapter, you quoted John 13. And so I'm just going to read two verses from it that I think really kind of summarizes and gets the ground started with the statement you made at the beginning of your chapter. And so in John 13, in verse 4, it says, and this is talking about Jesus, and he rises from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poureth water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. And so, as your chapter talking about servanthood, in the beginning, as this passage of scripture is talking about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And in the beginning of your chapter, and this was the whole, I think, force behind your chapter, was the point of getting your towel dirty.
Right.
And so, just so everybody can kind of get a little insight into your chapter, what does it mean to truly get your towel dirty in leadership?
Well, the context there is Christ serving. There was no Gentile servant who would typically have been present in the room because it was a borrowed room there in John 13. This is the night before Christ was crucified. So because it was a borrowed room, there was no hired servant. None of the disciples wanted to take the role of the servant. It was a menial task. It was honestly, a disgusting, offensive task. We would look at it and be like, man, I'm not doing that. So they're all sitting around after supper, and they would recline against the table. They wouldn't not like we do, sit in chairs under the table with our feet hidden, but their feet, obviously with sandals, were extended out. And Christ, here's how I see it playing out in my head. Either just not too far removed from this conversation, the disciples had been arguing even there in the upper room about who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom. Now, we know they did that on multiple occasions, but at least one, probably for the last time, it happened while they were in that upper room. And it's like Jesus silences their arguing. We know that James and John's question ticked the other disciples off and made them mad. And Jesus, he just silences the whole room, because he stood up, took his outer robe off, walked over to where the basin and the pitcher of water would have been, and he wrapped that loin towel around his waist, and he started washing each one of them's feet. Now, I personally believe that he started with Judas Iscariot. I really believe Judas was sitting right beside Jesus. There was John on one side, Judas on the other side. Judas had a high position among the disciples because he was the treasurer. He was trusted by them. And I believe Jesus started with him. And it astounds me that Jesus showed what true leadership really was all about, because he served. And think about who he served. By the end of the next day, it says that all the disciples forsook him and fled. Even John. Now, John was present at the cross, but at some base level, even John had kind of, at least in his spirit, had resigned himself that, this is it. I mean, this 3.5-year effort was futile until the resurrection. And by the way, aren't we glad that the resurrection gave clarity to everything, right? But Jesus is showing what it's like to serve, because here's what Jesus did. One author years ago wrote a book called Descending into Greatness. We think greatness and importance is like the higher you go in a positional flow chart, right? We just want to keep going up. Upward mobility, man, we hear that in the culture. Upward mobility. I want the chief seat. I want the top position. I want the top salary. I want the most perks. And Jesus takes that concept of leadership and greatness and he flips it on his head. And he literally descends. He says, whoever's going to be the greatest, the chiefest, the greatest leader, let him be the greatest servant. Jesus modeled not just in his words, but he modeled in his life, in his example. And the night before he was going to die, he showed us what it was to truly be the greatest leader, because he served and he washed their feet. And he did what none of the other ones wanted to do. He did what was hard. He did what was not appealing to his flesh. And he, as he talked about die to self, die to self, die to self, he showed us what it is to die to self. And that's why I really believe that the greatest leadership moment in the life of Jesus, apart from going to the cross, was when he stooped down and reached for the towel and got the towel dirty by washing the disciples' feet. And then he says this. He says, if I'm your Lord and your master, and I've done this for you, I've shown you an example. And he says, I want you to go you do this for one another. And he says, here's what kills me. He says, if you do this, happy are you if you do it.
Yeah.
And he's right. Now, that cuts against our grain. It cuts against the flesh. We feel that tension, right? When we have opportunity to serve out of the limelight, we have opportunity to do hard things. We have opportunity to be slighted and to just give it to Jesus and not make a big deal out of it. That's the spirit of Jesus. And so I believe personally, one of the greatest elements in spiritual leadership is serving one another.
And, and through that, and, even with how Jesus flipped that, instead of going up the tower, he put himself at the bottom. And I think it was Ken Cash that told me this. And if you think about it like a triangle, and I'm sure you've heard of it, that our worldly success is to get us at the top of the triangle, and that's the pinnacle. And we want to be at the top because that's what the world tells us. But with this, and even, this is where we see this in John 13, that, and like you said, Jesus completely flipped that triangle, and that he was put at the bottom, and he elevated, because his father, giving glory to his father, but everyone else was elevated above him.
Mm.
And I feel like so often in leadership, we get that mixed up.
Yeah.
That we never flip that triangle over, because it's
Right.
not only that Jesus did that, but telling his disciples to do it as well, that we should be at the bottom of that triangle.
Right.
And
Yes.
as leaders, if we truly care about the people that are following us and the people that we're shepherding as pastors or people leading, we should push everybody up, and
Yeah.
not only just push them up to help them out, but push them up to get them closer to the Lord.
Right. That's good.
And I think, and you talked about it at the beginning of your chapter, how our culture is so like the one who wins is the one who has the most toys.
Mm-hmm.
And our whole culture is that we want the most toys at the end. We want more money. We want more power. We want more position. We want more and more and more, but we never want just God to take care of it all.
Yes, sir.
And so my question to that, in a culture that is just saying you need more, 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 and you need to get here and get higher and higher, how as leaders, but more importantly, how as Christians, can we humble ourselves to not think that way?
Well, I think it's something, and I'm not trying to be like uber spiritual or mystic with this answer. I think it starts with us realizing that that's not our that what we're talking about is counterintuitive. In other words, I've got to have the Holy Spirit to overcome me and overwhelm me and sanctify me, do a work in me before I can ever get to that point. And I think it's a quick recognition, although an intentional, deliberate recognition. Holy Spirit, I struggle with this. This is my weak area. I don't want to die to self. I like pride. Pride feeds me. Pride makes me have a sense of, or at least a faulty sense of importance. So when the Holy Spirit enables me, when you think about the fruit of the Spirit, it's love, it's joy, it's meekness, it's temperance, it's self-control. It's not self-exertion. It's not self-exaltation. It's the opposite of self. The Spirit-filled life is the Christ life. It's not the self life. So I think the very first key is really to run to Jesus about this and confess, Lord, you know my struggle. You know this does not come easily or naturally or without a fight from my flesh. And so I willingly yield myself to you for you to live through me. Galatians 2:20. I'm crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but it's Christ who lives in me. And the life I live in the flesh now, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So it's Christ in me. It's Christ that's magnified. CP has to die. I have a dear friend who preaches a sermon called, and he takes it from John 3:30, where John the Baptist said, "He must increase, I must decrease." And he talks about Jesus over John. And it's got to be Jesus over Christian in my life if I really am going to live a life that is a life of servanthood like Christ.
And, I feel like so often we forget to ask Jesus to help us with those things we struggle with. And I feel like one of the biggest things, and it's unavoidable in leadership, because in leadership, you're going to deal with one person. There's always that one person that is frustrating, annoying, like, please shut up.
Right. Yes, sir.
There's always that one, because leadership is people. There's going to be people, and that's who we're dealing with. And because if you're going to be a leader and there's nobody for you to follow you, then who you leading? And
Right.
so I think through that, and you've kind of mentioned it in your chapter as well, and I find it interesting, even over my short term, just where I'm at in life, that there's some people that are like, man, you're hard to get along with.
Right. Yes, sir.
And, in leadership and following this example that Jesus has given us and humbling ourselves down is part of it. But how can we keep reminding ourselves, how do we properly lead the people that maybe we don't necessarily want to lead,
Sure.
necessarily don't want to serve, or there's maybe somebody that we feel like we don't need to serve because they don't deserve it? How do we do that?
All right. I'd say a couple of thoughts. Number one, I try to remember that I, like everyone else, I have I have parts of my personality in my life that grate on somebody's nerve somewhere. And that I am as frustrating, if not more so, than the person I have in mind that frustrates me. And that helps me. That thought gives me perspective and clarity. I'd say the second thing is I realize God's called me to love that person. He's commanded me to love that person. He's commanded me to lead that person. He's commanded me to put up with their idiosyncrasies and the frustrating parts of their personality so that I can hopefully, in a Christ-like way, bear a positive influence over them and lead them closer to Jesus. That's my role. That's my responsibility. And if I'm dismissive of them, if I'm derogatory, if I approach it always with a, man, they're a drain, they're a pain, I'm going to short circuit myself. I'm going to short circuit the influence the Lord wants me to have for His kingdom, His glory over them. And you brought up Brother Ken Cash a while ago. He has said to me on two separate occasions, he talks about, am I building the kingdom or am I trying to build my empire? And empire building is not the same as kingdom building.
Yeah.
And when I look at people as a pain and where I just want to write them off and, man, I don't want to deal with them, that's empire building.
Yeah.
That's not kingdom building.
And that's awesome. And he's said that probably every day in class, And I feel like a lot of people, and I hope it's not true of pastors and leaders, but I feel like a lot of people get confused between that fine line of what are we building here?
Yeah.
Is it for our own personal gain?
Right.
And to say we have the greatest programs, we have the greatest church in the world, or is it that we can build the kingdom?
Right.
Because as we think of when Jesus was here, what did he preach? Seek first the kingdom.
Yes, sir.
that this is about building the kingdom, not to make you elevate you, as we talked about. And so, just kind of in closing, real quick, I've got the notification my free time's running out. But in your application section, you asked this one question. I think this is the perfect way to end out. But you asked, why do you think the servant spirit of Jesus is so difficult to embrace? And so, why do you think that, Brother Christian?
I just think that it's not in our nature as depraved people. I think that one of the signs of our own depravity is our desire to elevate self. And growing in Christlikeness, growing in leadership, growing in servanthood is when the needle begins to move further away from my pride and ego, closer to Jesus's example that he gave us in John 13, Philippians 2, where he humbled himself. And that cuts against our grain. And I think that's why it's so difficult to actually live that out in life.
And so, I think, really what I think I get from this chapter is that the Lord has set us an example of leadership. And not only just for leaders, but every person that follows Jesus. And that we need to humble ourselves and not make it about ourselves, but make it all about Him. Because the whole goal, if we're going to be a Christian leader, point people to Him and build His kingdom. I feel like that should be the whole goal. And part of that, and how we do that, is humbling ourselves, be a servant. And like you said in your chapter, get the towel dirty.
Man, yes, sir.
But I just want to thank you for coming on today. I really enjoyed this. And thank you for everybody that watched today. Hopefully we can keep going. This is chapter 4. Next week is Noah Taylor, chapter 5, with being purposed in our leadership. But I just want to thank everybody for coming on this week, and I hope to see y'all next week. So see y'all.
Good shepherd, I'll follow all my days.